Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is John Lilas. I'm a family physician from the Eastern Cape at Madeleine Hospital, and I have the honor of introducing this exciting and what I'm sure is going to be like a well-discussed workshop. There are a few panelists here, but I think what I'm just going to do is introduce Zilla and Gail as the moderators and then hand the baton over to them for the next 2 hours or so. So Zilla worked at a clinic in George, then was medical manager of George Hospital between 2016 and 2021, and is presently manager of medical services in the George subdistrict. And Gail is worked at clinics in the Nysen subdistrict before moving into nursing management, and presently is assistant manager nursing Garden Route district. Working where I work at a district hospital, trying to help oversee kind of health in the sub-district around us, I recognize a huge group of women living in crisis, and I myself struggle to know how to help them in the best way possible. And so I'm really looking forward to the next few hours, as I'm sure you are too. And I'm going to hand over to Zilla to take us forward.
Thank you very much, John. I'm taking my computer with me because at the beginning of having to speak in front of people whose names I don't know, I always get a bit nervous. So I just want to give this its full honor. We are really excited to be part of this panel, and we are really excited that everybody didn't opt to go somewhere else. There's always the rule of 2 feet. And if you end up being alone in a room, you need to reconsider your life choices. But I'm glad to see you here. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope that you will appreciate the process. So my colleague Gail and I are going to facilitate this panel of 5 professionals that are going to discuss this morning with us an aspect of women's reproductive health that usually is the aspect that we tend to prefer to sideline in our discussions because it's just a bit uncomfortable. So today, this morning, we would like to offer an opportunity to engage respectfully with the experiences, opinions, and practices of 5 people who are delivering services in women's reproductive health. Today, our priority is focusing on coping with unwanted pregnancies and the termination of pregnancy service. We hope that this invites the audience to reflect on your own experiences and to increase the conversation around this important subject that has unfortunately often been pushed aside. We do not expect this to be a comprehensive review of all the different opinions existing, but rather an opportunity to gain insight into the realities presented by the panelists, which is framed within the South African rural healthcare space. So what we are going to do is each panelist will get an initial opportunity to share their story, and we will then have an opportunity for small group discussion amongst yourselves. This will lead to some questions back to the panel. We will take about 10 questions, spread out across the room. I would really like to have a sense of what people are thinking and experiencing. And then the panel will have an opportunity to respond to these. We will then have a last round of small group debrief before we close. Okay. Please forgive us for some strict timekeeping, which is going to be required for the panelists and the group discussions to all happen, as we only have about 2 hours for this. It is to enable everybody to get an opportunity to participate. Okay, any questions before we start? Happy days, all right? Okay, so our first speaker is Dr. Carl Furman. He is the head of obstetrics and gynecology at George Hospital, which is responsible for the specialist services and outreach to the Garden Route and Central Karoo. Carl has an extensive role And Cole, as a leading question, and just to start you off, I would just like to say that in this role, you are mandated with ensuring the full remit of women's health services are rendered in the Garden Route and the Central Karoo. What have been for you the enabling factors and barriers that you have experienced while ensuring the delivery of these services? Okay. You have a full 10 minutes to answer.
Okay. I think I'll probably answer some of those questions in my talk. But thank you. Good morning still, yes. And thank you for those who, I think it's Herma who invited me to this panel discussion. So yes, as Zelez mentioned, I'm Carl Furman. I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist. I've been in this region for 14 years now. I've been working at George, being the head of department in the last 6 years. And I remember when I was offered the job and went for the interview, I thought, wow, I can do this. But whew, 6 years down the line, I've been faced with many challenges, and I'm glad to have a very strong team that can help me with some of the issues that we experience. So I'm here to talk about my experience with second trimester termination of pregnancies. And you can see that we are in the Central Garden Route district, and that is quite a large district when you look at the Western Cape. So it looks like it's just under half, isn't it? And we have to deal with women's health and as well as reproductive health and termination of pregnancy services. So why should women have access to termination of pregnancy services? Well, a woman should not have an unwanted pregnancy. I think we can all agree on that. Women should have a right to control what happens to their bodies. Women want freedom, they want rights, they want choices. Women want to have safe abortions so that they can perhaps have fertility later. And I feel very strongly that women should not endure in the cycle of poverty, be disempowered, have no voice, and not enter the workplace, and always have this imbalance with their counterparts. So this is why I believe women should have access to safe termination services. So then you ask yourself, well, why don't women just use contraception? Okay? Why don't women just abstain from unprotected sex? Very simple, isn't it? So we know that in our world, in our districts, millions of women are disempowered. They just have no voice. They just have no power to say or control what's happening to their bodies. And they're not adequately informed about family planning options. They don't have access to primary health care. And when we talk about access, we also, I get example of who say that because of where they work, they are not able to get a day off to come to the, they just don't have access or even transport to primary health care. And of course, then they get their shot. After delivery, we give our patients maybe a depot injection or an Implanon, a long-acting reversible contraceptive. But then do they get to go back again? Many women don't get their next injection in the next 3 months. So we see that happening, that we cannot secure their contraception. And for me, what's very, very important is adolescence. I think it's quite a passion of mine, and I believe that our adolescents, our youth, our teenagers, they need education about sexuality, and they need to know about emergency contraception. Many, many of my clients who receive termination of pregnancies have no clue contraception, have no idea where to get emergency contraception. That's a failure. So how did we cope with unwanted pregnancies? This is not something that has just popped up now in the last 40, 50 years, not in 100 years, not in 1,000 years. This has been going on as we've been around, right? Since the dawn of mankind, we've been coping with unwanted pregnancies. And things were a bit different back then when you didn't have hospitals and drugs and medication and safe facilities. Things were much more dangerous. And for me, it was quite shocking to realize that infanticide was one of our earliest and primitive methods of abortion in human history. So the woman would go through the pregnancy, and then afterwards she'd have the child, and the child would be disposed of, or maybe disabled. And this was happening in times of spare resources, when times are hard, when there was poverty and famine. And if you think about it, those indications or those issues are still present today. And we still hear anecdotal stories of young mothers disposing of an infant in a bin, in a drain. So that is still happening. It happened 5,000, 6,000 years ago when we started recording history. So this cannot be. We know that it's now widely illegal, and we can provide humane, legal, earlier, and safer options for women. We're in a different era now. So moving all the way along from 6,000 years ago to 1996, when we had the Choice of Termination Act that was brought into our country and that made termination of pregnancy legal. And this was actually done to prevent all the illegal and backstreet abortions that were happening, where women lost their ability, their fertility, where they had infections, where some of them lost their lives. So we knew something had to be done. And this was brought into legislature in 1996. And of course, it tells us the circumstances in which we can terminate a pregnancy. So under 12 weeks, it's on demand, on request. And after 12 involved, there's various reasons where the mental health, the baby has got a severe abnormality, the pregnancy is a result of rape or incest. And the one I get mostly is the continued pregnancy would significantly affect the social and economic circumstances of the woman. Every time I look at that, yes, 2 minutes. Every time I look at that, that's quite vague, isn't it? Because doesn't any pregnancy affect your social and economic circumstances? But let's look at some of the reasons why women choose legal termination of pregnancy. This is a paper that came out in 2018, and it tells you, if you look down at the results there, reasons: formal education not completed. So that's a reason. You want women to enter the workplace. You want women to have higher education. So that's a valid reason. Financial difficulties. Failure. I was not on contraception because I just never got access. Wrong timing. This is not the right time, or I have 3 or 2 children already. And very common is problems related to the partner, the males, not accepting of the pregnancy, will not support. Okay, so these are the reasons I get, and these are the ones we accept. So our challenges: large geographical area, as you can see, vast distances between clinics and hospitals, that huge moral bias that still exists, and the negative attitude towards termination of pregnancy. So these women are secretly or quietly stigmatized and judged. They can feel it when they're in the presence of healthcare workers. And this occurs across multiple pathways. Even the cleaner in the ward or the person that brings the medication, they may slip something and just leave this woman feeling guilty. So this is a major barrier for us that needs to change. And this can contribute to our patients' psychological stress and self-blame and a mistrust of health services. And once you mistrust the health services, you've failed. So just remember your 4 principles of healthcare ethics, right? When you see a patient, respect their freedom. If you give advice, make sure it's advice that's good for her, for yourself, and because of your system in place, make sure it's equal and fair, so that not just that district is better off than that district. We all need to have some kind of equality. Okay, our numbers in the garden route, so you can see that's our combined termination of pregnancies across 4 years. You can see it's about under 1,000, but that's still deliveries. And we're trying to keep these second trimesters, which is the top dark green bar there. We're trying to keep right. So a way forward, my last slide. And who's this? Who's responsible for addressing equality and gender society? Is it government? Who is that? Who's protecting and educating and empowering our women to make better choices? Who's providing accessible and tailored contraception to all our women? Providing sexual education and contraception to our adolescents, which I think is very important. Should the basic education department get involved there and help us out? Because I believe that that is a very, very crucial place for us to start talking about. Access to emergency contraception, overcoming these biases and removing the stigma. We had stigmas with HIV, stigmas with TB. This is just another form of health service that would need to remove the stigma. And then where I get into play is to provide efficient, early, safe termination pregnancy services. Thank you. In answer to your question, some of the enabling factors would be the people that are here today that work tirelessly in trying to promote the service. And obviously I've mentioned some of the barriers that we receive. And it's mainly the stigma and people that just don't want to get involved. They're quite happy if it happens outside your hospital or that. So I think that for me is the most, the biggest barrier. But I'm very thankful to have a strong team that supports me and tries and really provide a valuable service to our people. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Carl. So I'm going to introduce our second panelist, who is Cora Rotenbach. Cora is a counselling coordinator at the Options Care Centre George, which is our central metros. Has a degree in social science and is currently busy with a second degree at the moment. So Cora, leading in your section, you have years of experience dealing with clients in crisis, and this gives you a chance to give a voice to women accessing the centre. How do these women present, and what are some of the issues that you need to work through with them? I think Cora's got a video first, if our tech support can help us with that.
George has been a refuge for many people dealing with unplanned pregnancies, HIV or family crises. To build relationship with the client's environment. We build trust, allowing them to express their feelings, identify their pressures, and work through their options. Some choose to have a limited ultrasound, and the time with a counsellor helps them make informed decisions. Support makes a huge difference. We walk with them with their pregnancy. We help them have healthy pregnancies. Our qualified nurse and a team offer pre- and postnatal classes, giving mothers and fathers the opportunity to fall in love with their unborn baby, build attachment, and prepare for a safe birth. The reality is that there are no quick fixes, and we strive to walk the road with our clients. For clients who are struggling financially, our pantry offers practical support of baby clothes, toiletries, and clothing for all the children and adults, and sometimes household goods. Options offers income-generating projects such as our card workshop and Amasisi jewellery. Recently, we launched Learn to Earn, an initiative that enables clients to set goals, go back to school, get a job, or start a small business. Coaching and workshops help them earn points that are spent on toiletries in our monthly shop while achieving goals. Our similar crises, such as teen parents, Shine for young adult moms, HIV groups, and Legacy Dad for. We also support the moms of premature babies in the George Hospital with special programs. We are passionate about working with young teenagers in schools with a sexual decision-making program called Undiluted and other workshops on menstrual cycle, HIV, and other related concerns. We support the biological moms who place the baby for adoption, and we have a support group for adoptive parents. Our kangaroo parents care for babies from birth until being placed for adoption. For clients struggling with a past abortion decision, we meet with them one-on-one to work through the journey and in-depth healing process. We also counsel for miscarriage, stillbirth, and early infant death loss. The aim is always to equip and empower clients to live powerful, responsible lives. Our team of staff and volunteers are passionate and committed to help our clients thrive. For a list of organizations similar to Options, please go to www.pregnancyhelpnetwork.org.za.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for every single doctor and medical personnel in this room. We know it's hard out there and the need is always greater. But let us always remember dealing with people, not just names, not chasing numbers, people emotions. And most often the doctors that are sitting here, there's so many people to attend to, and that's why we are here to sit with every single person. So please think back to a time when you faced a crisis. Okay. Think back how you felt. The feelings or emotions of fear, shock, anger, disappointment, so any feelings that you had. Okay. What were your overwhelming pressures? Internally is normally the feelings, and then also your goals and dreams, your values or belief system, and also your self-esteem. And then externally, we look always at what other people going to say, the people, your culture, what is your cultural beliefs, maybe the church or religious belief, and your circumstances. Okay. So our crisis pregnancy clients, they go through the same. We call it the feelings, and then overwhelming stress, and then strengths. So when we experience a crisis and we can't hear much, they are in utter disbelief, and then they shut off. So no matter what you tell them in that moment, they're not even hearing any word. And when we are in a crisis, and this is why Options Care Center is there, is to start to unpack that crisis and to unpack the process so that they can start to process the crisis that they're in. Our counseling is not judgmental, non-manipulative. We don't make suggestions for any person that's sitting in a counseling room. We will work through all the options of a crisis pregnancy, and we also explain all the options to them. So we stay with the client and we listen to them. So when they present a problem, we sit with them, we listen, and we just give that back so that they can start to process. And all the options, whether you choose parenting, foster care, adoption, or abortion, it all has a lifelong impact on the client. So all of those options, it's not an easy option. And we support the client no matter what they choose. So it's necessary to have all the information before they choose to abort. And we feel the choice she needs to live with for the rest of her life. She must have peace with that choice. It mustn't be forced by a family member, a boyfriend, maybe they say you're going to lose your security. It must be a decision that they make themselves. And she needs to know the risks and the information. She mustn't be prepared to make she must be prepared to make this decision. And we believe that no woman should face a crisis pregnancy alone. We give value to the person in front of us, normally the whole person with the pregnancy included. And when we give information and support, we are non-directive. So we sit with them and work with them. Some women with an unexpected pregnancy felt like they had no other choice but abortion. They are also not informed about the options. And every woman deserves to understand the options and have access to alternatives to an unwanted pregnancy. Our goal is to provide a safe place for women and men experiencing the challenges of an unexpected pregnancy to work through their unique pregnancy situation. Every single person's story is different. To work with that differences, the circumstances, and empower them to make an informed decision. So I'm going to look quickly at the options. So parenting is the one that we all know. We are there to support the teen moms and the single moms. We want them to succeed in life and build a strong attachment with their baby. So the first 1,000 days we all know is so important. And from the moment of conception, that 1,000 days start. But we also want them to succeed in life. So we have those programs that will help them to finish school, to get their own incomes. And then another option is foster care. We all know what is foster care. But it's not the ideal option if the mom is not involved with that child. Then that child just becomes part of the system. But we want, if a foster mom is living with the same home or living space as the mom, then it's a good option. And then adoption, this option is most often only presented when they are past the legal requirements of an abortion. So we explain the process well, we work through all the processes, and then I want to get to the abortion-minded client that you want to hear about. We give them all the information and whether or not pregnancy. And we've seen lately that people think they're 8 weeks pregnant and then they're 16 weeks pregnant. So we work with that where they are. And we also prepare or inform them about the procedure and what type of TOP will be performed so that they know what to expect. Often they ask the question, will it be painful? Will I be awake? And we give them all the information. We also see in a counseling room a person who haven't dealt with the trauma of a previous abortion will sometimes go for multiple abortions. And that's what we want to stop. There's also many reasons for making the abortion decision. And often we miss people who had multiple miscarriages. They are also one of those, or a stillborn baby who would rather abort out of the fear of losing another pregnancy. So those people we mustn't miss. We need to counsel them. Also, after a very traumatic birth experience, those people also need counseling. We counsel people who have had an abortion, and some of them express post-traumatic stress symptoms, depression, substance abuse, anger, self-hatred, and suicidal tendencies, and many more. But deep in-depth counseling before a TOP to unpack the crisis is always good. So when they make their decision, they think much clearer. And those who are struggling with their abortion decision, we walk with through the journey, the post-abortion recovery counseling. And we stay connected with our clients. And I just want to finish with 2 quick stories. We had a single mom who had a daughter that is a teenager. And the mother brought her in. The mom was abortion determined. They struggled financially. But the teen girl didn't want to go for an abortion. And the mom forced her to have that abortion, and afterwards she had an infection that led to a hysterectomy. And because she was so traumatized, they brought her back, and we are still working with her. But stories like this is very hard. So people need the counseling. And also the last one, I had a client that came in, her abortion was booked for the next day. I counseled her deeply, and the main issue was also finances. She lost her job due to COVID. She didn't have a proper place to stay, but her mom was supporting her. And then when she found out she's pregnant, the guy, it was just a one-night stand, the guy just left, he blocked her. And I counseled her and we unpacked. And then she realized she can maybe tell a friend that she's pregnant. She told a friend, and they arranged actually the friend's mother or parents called her and said, but we will look after your baby afterwards. And she kept that baby. And 2 years later, she's like, my whole life changed. I have a job. Everything is perfect. And I'm so glad I kept the baby. But there's many stories. I can tell you many, many stories. But my last thing, after unpacking a situation, people can, the crisis come down. They can think clearly. And I just want to leave you with, we are dealing with people, not just names. They need to know all the options and consequences of choices. People with feelings and emotions. Let us never lose compassion and kindness. Thank you.
Thank you, Cora, and thank you, Carl. Those are very useful. I especially liked, Cora, that you highlighted the fact that all options have long lifetime impacts. I think every person in this room who has ever been pregnant can remember all of those pregnancies, and that is our reality. Carl, and I really liked your highlight of responsibility. Who is responsible for ensuring that women have an equal playing field? Who is responsible for ensuring that our society sees to that women are cared for when they are not in control? I would like to now introduce Francois Potgieter. Dr. Francois is the clinical manager of the Knysna-Bito subdistrict. So Francois, as a member of the management team that has been delivering TOP services in that district for a couple of years now, what do you feel has been the driving force behind the subdistrict's ability to implement a successful TOP service? And what has been your experience in a managerial role in change management and bringing people on board? So.
Thank you, Zilla. Hi, everyone. I'm a bit taller than the rest of the... There we go. Hopefully I'll stay within my time. But I'll just quickly tell you. So I started working in Knysna Hospital in 2009 as a community service officer. And the story started basically there, where when we got there as young clinicians, there was a doctor already delivering the service in providing safe termination of pregnancies, the late Dr. Nicol. And as young clinicians, I think you are very influential, and we basically, as our role developed as senior clinicians and senior management, we took over that baton and took the service forward. So it was easy for us to build on that. We still have barriers, like everyone, I think, experiences, access to care for women. We've got vast areas that we cover. So we try and make access as easy as possible for all our patients. And the biggest barrier is still societal and staff's attitudes and beliefs and stigma that the women need to face to accessing the service. And we try and tackle that by various workshops and normalizing the talk and process of TOPs. But I think our biggest advantage that we have is, as senior clinicians and as management, we're fortunate to have a team whose aim it is to overcome these barriers in our working environment and to make it as safe as possible for women to access this service. So following the footsteps of those before us, I think we create a space. We've got quite a large team of doctors and nurses, and our aim is to create a space where people that want to get involved and want to deliver the service are willing and able to say, I want to get involved. They're able to grow in delivering a safe service, and even to give their opinions on how to change this service and make it better for the women. And like I said, as young clinicians are quite influenceable, I think we allow people to make up their own minds of who wants to get involved and who wants to be involved. I think the second thing we've achieved is that we've kind of normalized the service. So we respect every single individual that works there's beliefs and convictions, but we prioritize the service delivery of having women to be able to access the service. And we have kind of an opt-out approach. So even if you don't want to be involved in delivering or doing a procedure that involves a termination of pregnancy, we do strongly recommend and advocate that you are involved with either lectures or providing preventative services, with the end goal, and I think this is everyone's goal, is for this for prevention of pregnancy to be in such a way that the service is not needed. So that is what we focus on, and we definitely get all our doctors involved, even those who don't want to be involved in delivering terminations. For me personally, as a manager, I think my responsibility as a manager of the sub-district is to make sure that we have a functioning service, to make sure that we have a service where women in crisis can be helped. And we do a lot of this with values clarification workshops, and that goes for all staff members, not people involved, but from your security guards at the door to your cleaning staff. Everyone must be involved in values clarification workshops, and it involves what it does, or the aim that it has, is to create a non-judgmental environment where not only people seeking terminations, but for all walks of life, irrespective of your background, your religion, whether you have a bad lifestyle or a good lifestyle, we welcome you into our healthcare service. And a second focus of our team when it comes to terminations is that we aim to deliver the best possible service, which is our responsibility as public servants in the Western Cape. And that is our real focus. And I think for doctors working in rural health, I think we have a responsibility that we are leaders in our hospitals and in our teams. And my view is that we have a responsibility to be an example to those who work with us, as we have quite a big influence on the whole team. as people look up to us in smaller hospitals and in the rural district. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Francois. Thanks for sticking to time. It's difficult when everybody has lots of words to say. So I'm now going to introduce Cameron, who's the youngest member on our panel, final year UCT medical student with a special interest in ethics. So Cameron presented this year at the UNESCO World Bioethics Conference and has been invited to present at the UCT Research Day later in this year. So in South Africa, access to TOP services is prescribed by law, yet discussions regarding TOPs are still polarized. So how can ethics help clarify our thinking in this topic and provide us with ethical perspectives to approach the question of when TOPs are morally permissible? Thanks, Cameron.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming through. I feel very honored to speak here today. I'm a strong advocate for having more humanities in healthcare, and my particular interest is philosophy. And I just want to echo what Zilla said at the beginning of her talk, that this is a naturally emotive topic. It evokes a lot of passions, and that's a good thing. And I want to also take up Victor's offer and use my license to prescribe to give you a logical framework to approach termination of pregnancies in a more ethical way. So this is the structure of my talk, and I'm going to start by outlining the nature of the debate. This is what most people envision when they talk about abortion. It's this intense polarization where people are on opposite sides of a very large rift. However, this is an illusory dichotomy, I argue. It's not reflective of the underlying current of thought regarding abortions. The reality is that most people actually agree that there are instances in which termination of pregnancies are clearly moral and necessary, and Carl outlined some of those for us this morning. And there are instances in which they are clearly immoral. And the characterization of the debate in terms of pro-choice and pro-life is beneficial mostly to politicians and social activists and those who make a living through social media. Right? Politicians find it beneficial because they will, of course, advocate for the position which is most conducive to their electability. Social activists benefit as abortion is an issue which naturally lends itself to moral posturing. In other words, the appearance of being virtuous without bearing the consequences of holding those positions. And as such, this dichotomy is philosophically redundant, and it doesn't actually help us to answer the question of when a termination of pregnancy is morally permissible. So with that being said, let's look at some of the common fallacies which arise when it comes to discussing termination of pregnancies. The first one are unsubstantiated premises. So this is a common argument that you see. Actions which are legal are moral, TOPs are legal, and therefore TOPs must be moral. It's intuitively appealing. It appeals to our natural moral intuitions, but is it convincing? Well, not exactly. You see, the first premise is assumed to be true, but it requires justification in and of itself. Proponents of the argument state that TOPs are moral because they are legal, but then also hold that TOPs are legal because they are moral, i.e. they are assuming what needs to be proven. And clearly there are instances in which there are actions which are legal but not moral, and actions which are illegal but are clearly moral. The next one is the false dichotomy. So people argue that if you are pro-life, you must be against TOPs and women's rights and reproductive health, and that if you are pro-choice, you must be in favor of killing babies and abdicating responsibility for your decisions. As I said earlier, the truth is that there are a myriad of positions which fall in between these two poles, and most people are conscious of the fact that there are a numerous number of positions you can hold. It's also acceptable, I want to emphasize, to not have a position on this, and to still be forming your opinions and to continue learning and educating. And I hope that that's where everybody is in this process. This also brings me to the issue of moral permissibility versus moral criticizability. So moral permissibility is an action which no one has a right against me doing and doesn't infringe on anybody else's rights. However, an action may be morally permissible, but not be free of moral criticism. So there is a position, for example, where you can be a proponent of TOPs, you want to expand access to TOPs, and you believe that it should be morally permissible, but that the actions or the decisions which result in the need for the TOP in the first place can still be morally criticized. The next one is a slippery slope argument. So people argue often that expanding access to abortions will lead to an increased number of abortions. Unfortunately, the data does not actually back this up, right? In governments where they've increased expansion to abortion, such as the Obama administration, it led to a decrease in the number of abortions, the abortion rate, and the abortion ratio. So that's not a very good argument. The next one is straw manning, right? Reducing an opponent's argument so it's easier to refute. So people will often say that people in favor of limiting TOPs are religious fundamentalists. Of course, there are very persuasive arguments against TOPs which are not religious in nature. And people will say that, well, people in favor of expanding TOPs are trying to absolve people of the consequences of falling pregnant. Well, often the arguments for terminating a pregnancy may be premised precisely on the consideration of the consequences of carrying that pregnancy to term. So now let's look at a few different approaches we can take towards termination of pregnancies. And there are quite a number of them. There are rights-based arguments, utilitarian arguments, arguments from desire, from assumed human qualities, and several more. So I'm going to go over the main ones that come up in this debate. The first one is Judith Jarvis Thompson's violinist argument. Some of you might have heard of the analogy where this poor violinist gets captured and gets kidnapped by the Music Lovers Society and hooked up to a machine. But the point of the analogy is that a woman's right to a termination of pregnancy is based on bodily autonomy and privacy. Thompson argues that carrying a fetus is comparable to being a good Samaritan. You are going over and above, but you are not morally obliged to carry that pregnancy to term. And her central argument is that a woman's right to control her body permits her to abort a fetus, even one that we consider to have obtained personhood and all the rights that go along with having personhood. In other words, the right to life does not entail the right to be kept alive. Next, we have Marcus's future like ours argument. So he says that the tragedy of killing lies in the infliction of a premature death on somebody. And the tragedy of a premature death is that it deprives a person of their future like ours, right? I.e. all the future goods and the goods of consciousness that you would have had you lived out your life till the end of time. And he argues that the majority of fetuses will undergo typical development so as to have a future like most of ours, and therefore it is unjust to terminate most pregnancies. So that would be a more pro-life argument, if you will. Next, we have arguments from desire. So David Boonen says that the right to life is grounded in the desire to continue living. And he says that the capacity for consciousness is a necessary condition to desire to continue living. And since most fetuses will not possess that desire until very late on in the pregnancy, because they haven't developed a capacity for consciousness until very late in the pregnancy, most termination of pregnancies are actually morally permissible. And the last one are utilitarian arguments. So this is by Peter Singer, Warren Tooley, and those cohort. They say that what is important is the principle which approves or disapproves of an action according to the tendency in which it augments or diminishes the happiness or the interest of the party in question. So with regards to abortion, this is a very commonly cited view. Carl outlined it as well about how it's going to affect the mother in terms of her socioeconomic interests, in terms of her empowerment, in terms of getting out of poverty. The one issue with this is that it does unfortunately have a logical endpoint, and some philosophers like Peter Singer accept the endpoint, which is that in certain instances it makes infanticide moral, which is a bit of a radical position. So important take-home messages. The first thing that I want to say is that the debate regarding when TOPs should be ethically permissible is not nearly as polarized as it seems. That's only beneficial to people with a vested interest in keeping that polarized argument going. The second thing is that many of the common opinions that you'll hear have got a lot of fallacies embedded in them, and it's important to critically self-examine our arguments. There are different approaches to TOPs. It's important to recognize that, and it renders different conclusions to what you consider to be a moral termination of pregnancy. And lastly, I think it's important that we improve our ethical knowledge as doctors and we continuously self-examine ourselves so that we can expand access, but do so in an ethical manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. You talk very fast and very fluently. We really appreciate it. Okay. I really appreciate what we've heard from our speakers thus far, especially in terms of working from the heart and the kindness and seeing the person in front of you for who they are. Also from Francois, you know, how to improve the services for women. Bring your opinions, don't just opt out, and get involved in the things that you feel you can involved with so that the whole service improves. have an end goal and a purpose, like Dr. Victor told us. It's not about giving the team targets and goals and things to do. It's about ensuring that that is underwritten in a purpose, which is improving lives for women. And I really appreciated also saying that our end goal and our purpose, probably for all of us that we can all subscribe to, is rendering a service until it is no longer required, getting to a point where we all have made the service redundant. In rural health, leaders have a responsibility to be, doctors have a responsibility to be leaders in our community and in our team. I appreciate, Cameron, that you reminded us that opinions are fluid and that they progress through life, and that we shouldn't get caught in polarized decision making. Thank you very much. Judiak Ranape is our next speaker. We are very excited to have Judiak here all the way from Cape Town. She is a practicing Catholic and professional nurse, actively involved in the provision of TOP services. And Judiak, in this space, you provide a very personal perspective on delivering the service. We would like to hear from you. How did you choose to work in this space? And what barriers to accessing TOP services that women have a legal right to do the women that you care for experience?
Shorter than everybody. It's good morning, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to start my presentation with a quote from Dr. Willie Parker. Dr. Willie Parker is an OBGYN and an abortion provider in the Deep South in Alabama in the US. And he says that there's two words that describes him and the word that he does. And these two words are passion and compassion. And then he says, before he actually says that, I actually realized that these words actually describes me too. And Dr. Willie Parker says, passion is caring about something enough to want to do it, even to a point of discomfort. And he says compassion is having the deep feeling of wanting to do something to relieve the suffering of others. And this is what we do as providers. Now, abortion, whether it's safe or unsafe, it's a very common event in our facilities. I work in primary healthcare facilities. And between March and July, which is 5 months here in 2022, in the Southern Western District in the Metro, we have done 7,812 medical and surgical abortions. I'm not saying the Metro, I'm saying Southern Western District. So I'm probably talking about 7 facilities, including Groote Schuur and New Somerset Hospital, 7,812 abortions. Now, when a woman is determined to end a pregnancy, she will do so. She will risk her life. It doesn't matter, regardless of whether it is safe or legal, she will do it. And I'm saying that because I'm on the ground and I'm seeing the women. And this is because the prospects of this woman thinking about keeping this pregnancy are unbearable. So like Carla had said, we do support. And Carla, we do give options in the public sector. We do counsel them, yes. We go through all the intense things to support them in all the ways and refer them as much as we can. But then we do continue to provide the service if they prefer to like to have the service. So in 2008, the Department of Health decided that they're going to move first trimester abortion to primary care level. And I was a clinical nurse practitioner working at Lady Michaela's Community Health Center. And meetings happened with the HODs and the managers. And when I looked again, I had been sent to go and do attend a values clarification and attitude transformation workshop. And then I attended a manual vacuum aspiration course that was given by IPAS South Africa at that time. Once I was mentored and found competent, then I started providing abortions on a Monday and a Wednesday. And all the other days, I was working as a clinical nurse practitioner, and I had to see my quota of 30 patients of acute and chronic diseases, never to squeeze in reproductive health or abortion service patients, and just continue with the order of the day. The facility I was working at that time was serving a majority of elderly patients. So, and at that time, I worked and lived among the community I was serving. Therefore, stigma and judgment made my life difficult. And as Zilla has already pointed out, I'm a practicing Catholic. So I attend the Catholic Church in Lansdowne. I live in Southfield. And fellow parishioners, because I live with them, to avoid standing the whole day in the facilities, they say, Sister Renape, please bring the medication to church on Sunday. So I'll take their, collect their CDUs, put it in my boot. After Mass, they all come and I give them their medication. But soon that ended, because then they found out that I was doing abortions and couldn't understand. Both my sons were altar service at the time at the church, and here they hear that Sister Renape is providing abortions. And it was difficult. I was asked a lot of questions. I received a lot of prayers. I had women go to Schoenstatt, to the shrine, to pray the rosary for me. They even said to me, I should actually tell management that I should not be doing the procedures. But unfortunately, things had to be done. I had to ask myself, if I don't do it, then who will? And this abortion story came when I was already a women's health champion at that facility. I was treating STIs, I was doing pap smears, I was doing campaigns, I was just about it. So it automatically seemed okay for me to carry on. My colleagues at that facility treated me with a lot of respect, but nobody wanted to get involved with abortion services. So it was my baby. So even if the patient opens their mouth about, I missed the pregnancy, they say, Sister Judy, before they even if it wasn't meant for me. But yet again, it was so difficult because I felt unsupported, I was lonely, and I was in doubt at times and asking myself whether what I was doing was wrong or right, because everybody else seems to be different. But yet then I would rise, because as I walk in the passage towards room 16, which was my consulting room, there'll be women queuing up to come and access the service. I was supported by Dr. Mahwali from IPAS and Dr. Marika Alblas, because in my facility, nobody's supported. So I could reach out to them when days are down. I could reach out when I had challenging situations that I needed to deal with. And in the facility, when the facility closes at 4 o'clock, everybody leaves, even if I had patients. But there was this one physician that used to stay in the foyer and said, Judy, I'll sit outside, I won't come in. If you have complications, you can call me. So that was my journey. I've since moved out of the facility. I support and mentor and train healthcare providers that provide abortions. I've been there. I know that it didn't happen overnight, that I wake up and I'm brave and I'm saying I am going to do abortions. As I myself, having gone through values, I had issues. I'd be busy in between a woman's leg and ask myself, but why are you doing it if you're screaming? It took me long for me to overcome that. Hence, I'd like to encourage others. When the need is there and you've overcome it, then the service should actually be provided. Women are having lots of barriers. At the moment, we're having challenges with me training lots of healthcare providers, but I can count the facilities that are offering the services. Managers do not want to offer the service. There's a lot of gatekeeping that is happening. It's a big, big challenge. But like Doctor had said, we're still having challenges with contraceptives. Our women still don't have choices. We've got the 2020 guidelines for safe conception and abortion. They are not adopted in the Western Cape. They are not implemented here. Therefore, we cannot disseminate them. Our women don't have choices. If they have problems with side effects and challenges with contraceptives that have failed, there is nothing else. We're having challenges offering them emergency contraceptives. So we're having lots and lots of work, and I'm glad that we have such a big audience, and I feel so warm inside to know that there's people that are actually working so hard so that we can actually offer this service to the women and girls. So despite the fact that we have the CTOP Act that is liberal, it doesn't mean that there's a guarantee for a woman to receive safe abortions. So my point out is we need to empower our women and girls. We need to educate them. We need to give them lots and lots of information. We need to allow them to can access bodily autonomy and be able to can allow them to can make decisions and be hopeful that they can actually come and access services. And just lastly, I just want to say that I'm very happy that you guys invited me over here. I've always had a relationship with the rural because there's very limited amount of abortion trainers and abortion providers. So when we come to values and so on, we go across and we train each other and so on. And before COVID came every year, because abortion providers are not appreciated, I used to go far and wide and raise funds and call all the abortion providers, rural and the metro, and say, I'd just like to say thank you. I don't have much to do, but I at least can get some sponsorship and give you a 3-course meal. And then we just talk because we don't even get debriefing. And then when we finish with that meeting on the 10th of March every year, which is International Abortion Provider Appreciation Day, we disperse, we go back to our facilities, we are rejuvenated, we start again, and we meet again next year. So hopefully COVID is going to give us a break and we'll be able to embrace each other again. Thank you.
So this is where the experimental part of our panel discussion starts.